Welcome to the Airworthiness Outreach briefing on the risk assessment worksheet for certain experimental aircraft operating limitations. This briefing is sponsored by the Aircraft Certification Service, Production and Airworthiness Section, Air 632, in collaboration with the Flight Standards Maintenance Division, AFS 300, and the General Aviation and Commercial Division, AFS 800. The purpose of the Aircraft Certification Service Production and Airworthiness Outreach Program is to disseminate consistent information to applicable personnel. Outreach briefings are not designed, nor are they intended to substitute formal, informal, or on-the-job training. Training requests are coordinated through your manager and submitted to the appropriate Workforce Development Service. Air uses policy memorandums and policy statements to clarify or to provide guidance. Policy memorandums are internal documents from air management to users of directives. They provide clarification or guidance for directives to FAA employees and designees affected by those directives. A policy statement contains guidance on a statute, regulation, directive, policy, or technical issue. They disseminate guidance to FAA employees and to the public. Policy memorandums and statements are located in the Dynamic Regulatory Library. The implementation of the risk assessment worksheet for certain experimental aircraft in this briefing was issued through an Air Policy Memorandum. During this briefing, we will cover the purpose, background, scope, assessment process, the responsibilities, and the Aircraft Certification Service Operating Limitations Coordination Mailbox. The references used in the presentation are in 14 CFR Part 21.191, Part 21.195, Part 91.319C, and FAA Order 8130.2 and the Air 600 Policy Memo and Associated Risk Assessment Questionnaire. The risk assessment serves a critical role in the safety of the national airspace system by providing a structured method for evaluating the risks associated with modifying operating limitations for certain experimental aircraft to include high-risk aircraft. The risk assessment process provides a risk-based approach to determine whether modification of the operation limitations would be appropriate for certain experimental aircraft. The risk assessment worksheet is designed to identify risks associated with experimental aircraft operating over densely populated areas for the purpose of takeoff and landing. It is also used to determine if very high-risk aircraft, as defined by FAA Order 8130.2, can be safely operated at night or in instrument meteorological conditions. The process for modifying operating limitations involves a thorough evaluation of the applicant's request and rationale for the modification and the proposed equivalent level of safety. It is important to note that operating limitations cannot offer or be used as an exemption from the applicable regulations. The aviation community faces unique challenges because many airports in the United States have experienced significant population growth near airport runways. This makes it difficult to meet the regulatory requirements when taking off and landing over densely populated areas. For this reason, an AVS team was established to provide recommendations and potential avenues to mitigate the risks. As a result, the risk assessment worksheet was developed in coordination with the Aircraft Certification and Flight Standards Services to offer a risk-based approach to determine if an operator has an equivalent level of safety to modify operating limitations. The risk assessment is used to evaluate certain aircraft certificated as experimental and includes Section 21.191A, research and development that includes flight testing of new aircraft designs, modifications, or technologies. Section 21.191b, showing compliance with regulations that includes demonstrating that an aircraft meets specific regulatory requirements. Section 21.191c, crew training that pertains to training pilots and other crew members on new aircraft types or procedures. Section 21.191d, exhibition aircraft used for air shows, demonstrations, or other public displays. Section 21.191f, and 21.195, Market Survey for evaluating the potential market for a new aircraft design. This risk assessment doesn't apply to unmanned aircraft regardless of certification basis. Section 21.191e, Experimental purposes for air racing. Section 21.191g, Operating amateur-built aircraft. Section 21.191h, operating primary kit-built aircraft or Section 21.191I, operating light sport aircraft. The assessment process for modifying operating limitations involves a thorough evaluation of the applicant's request, the rationale for the modification, and the proposed equivalent level of safety. The Aviation Safety Inspector, Designee, or Organization Designation Authorization Unit members will use information provided by the applicant to complete the risk assessment questionnaire. The use of the questionnaire is voluntary on the part of the applicant. The questionnaire incorporates a points-based approach to assess the risks associated with the proposed modifications. There are 21 questions on the risk assessment worksheet that assesses the airworthiness of the aircraft, applicant's experience, and operations. Each question is given a score on a scale of 0 to 5 points for a total of 105 points possible. 7 questions are scored either a 0 or a 5. After completing the questions independently using the applicant's provided information, the individual questions are summed. The total score and number of N/A's marked on the risk assessment sheet, if any, determine which column of the assessment level scoring matrix is used to determine the level of approval required. If the risks are mitigated to an acceptable level, the Aviation Safety Inspector, Designee, or Organizational Delegated Authorization Unit member may authorize the modification of the operating limitations. This authorization would be issued through a change to the airworthiness certificate, reflecting the new operating limitations. It is important to emphasize that applicants must not complete the questionnaire. It must be independently completed by the Aviation Safety Inspector, Designee, or Organization Delegation Authorization Unit member. The use of the risk assessment by the applicant is voluntary. All change requests to the risk worksheet must be coordinated with AIR 600, Policy and Standards Division. Unauthorized changes to the risk assessment worksheet are prohibited. Aviation safety inspectors should contact their applicable manager to request a change. Designees and Organization Delegated Authorization Unit members are to contact their flight standards or aircraft certification point of contact, managing specialist, or Organization Delegated Authorization lead. FAA Order 8130.2, Appendix D, Issuing Operating Limitations with Special Airworthiness Certificates, provides procedures for issuing operating limitations for aircraft issued Special Airworthiness Certificates. In addition, the Risk Assessment Worksheet for certain experimental aircraft operating limitations provides additional information for processing the proposed equivalent level of safety. The Aviation Safety Inspector, Designee, or Organization Delegated Authorization Unit member should coordinate with the applicant to obtain information to complete Sections 1 through 3 to document the risk and determine if there is a sufficient equivalent level of safety for the modification of the applicable operating limitations. Once the risk worksheet is scored, the Aviation Safety Inspector, Designee, or Organization Delegated Authorization Unit member must coordinate with the Flight Standards Operations Aviation Safety Inspector prior to issuing or modifying operation limitations. If a higher review is required by the scoring matrix, the assessment documentation, including the completed risk worksheet questionnaire, draft copy of the operating limitations, and the program letter, are sent to the Air Operation Limitations Coordination mailbox. Once the coordination process is completed, the airworthiness certificate with the modified operating limitations can be issued. Please don't send the risk assessment and evidence to the aircraft registry. The review should be completed and signed by the appropriate FAA office, as depicted on the scoring matrix results, when it is beyond the authorization of the Aviation Safety Inspector. The lower the score, the higher the review. The reviewer reviews the applicant's documentation, verifies the responses, points awarded, and either concurs or non-concurs with the risk assessment and continues to process the worksheet in accordance with the risk assessment worksheet instructions and FAA Order 8130.2. If the reviewer concurs, the reviewer's signature authorizes the assessment to act as an equivalent level of safety for operational relief. Regardless of the level of the reviewer, once the points are totaled and scored, the proposed request to modify or omit an operating limitation must be sent to the Operations Limitations Coordination mailbox. Requests to modify, add, or omit an operating limitation must be submitted to the Air Operating Limitations Coordination mailbox. The coordination mailbox is monitored by several offices to process and complete the coordination actions. After the coordination is completed, the air representative will check the coordination box as complete on the risk assessment worksheet and annotate the name, date, Office of Primary Responsibility Coordinators, and send the assessment to the certificating in ASI. Thank you for listening to the Air 600 Production and Airworthiness Briefing. Questions regarding the risk assessment for certain experimental aircraft operating limitations may be sent to the 9-AVS-632-correspondence.faa.gov mailbox. Questions will be collected and coordinated with flight standards for responses. The risk assessment worksheet may be downloaded from the Dynamic Regulatory System by using the applicable menu to view a current version of FAA Order 8130.2. Once open for viewing, please note the panel on the left side of the screen to DRS. The viewer should click on the Attachment and/or Public Comments tab to access the risk assessment for certain experimental aircraft operating limitations worksheet and instructions and associated policy memos. The user must always check DRS for the most current directive and air policy memos before each use of the assessment to ensure they have the most recent memos for the policy and worksheet. Policy memos and statements are only available on DRS. They are not accessible through the Public Regulations and Policies, Orders, and Notices website. In conclusion, we covered the purpose of the risk assessment, the background, scope, assessment process, the responsibilities of those involved, and the Air Operating Limitation Coordination Mailbox. This concludes the briefing. All questions regarding the questionnaire may be directed to 9-AVS-AIR-632-correspondence.faa.gov.